I never thought my story would begin with the sound of champagne glasses clinking and the Atlantic breeze brushing against my skin. But that's how it was until the very moment my daughter-in-law leaned close to my ear, her voice soft and sweet like honey laced with poison. "Smile for the dolphins," she whispered. And with a gentle push, so calculated it almost felt affectionate, she sent me over the polished rail of the yacht. 1 second, I was standing on the deck in my silk evening dress, breathing in salt and sunset. The next, I was plummeting into icy water, gasping as the waves swallowed me whole. My son, Logan, didn't reach for me. He didn't scream. He didn't even move. He just stood there, one hand in his pocket, watching as if the scene had already been rehearsed. It wasn't panic that filled me in that moment, it was clarity. They wanted me gone. And if you're listening to this now, you'll want to know why. But before I take you into the frigid black water, before I tell you how close I came to disappearing forever, I need you to understand what happened later that very night. Because against every odd, when they returned to the Grand Charleston home I built with their father, they found me not at the bottom of the Atlantic, but seated calmly in my favorite armchair, a lamp glowing warmly beside me, waiting with something they could never have prepared for 2 sealed envelopes, and resting on the table like a choice from a storybook. One promised mercy, the other promised ruin. And neither, I assure you, was empty. The yacht had been anchored a few miles off Hilton Head, far enough from shore that the coastline was a blur of twinkling lights, close enough that the water looked deceptively calm. The Ellison family yacht was a gleaming 42-foot vessel, all white fiberglass and polished chrome, bought under the guise of family memories. But I knew better. Every corner of that boat whispered of excess, of money siphoned under my nose, of betrayals dressed as celebrations. Logan had called it a toast to my recovery, his smile as warm as Southern hospitality. He knew how badly I longed for closeness after months of surgery and therapy. He knew that as a widow in her 50s, I still wanted to believe family mattered more than money. And so, I came dressed in the navy silk gown my late husband once said made my eyes look like midnight, clutching a hope that maybe my son and his wife had remembered what it meant to love me. Hope can be a dangerous thing. The push itself was not violent. Sloane, my daughter-in-law, was too clever for that. She only gave the slightest nudge, the kind that could be mistaken for an accident, a stumble, a tragic misstep of an aging woman still recovering from knee surgery. To anyone else, it would look like bad luck. To me, falling through the air. I heard the truth loud as the waves crashing below this was no accident. The cold of the Atlantic cut sharper than knives. My lungs seized as seawater surged into my throat. Silk clung to me like an anchor, dragging me down. Above, I caught a final glimpse of Logan's silhouette against the fading sun. He did not move. He did not shout. He did not even pretend to save me. Instead, he turned toward his wife, who was already pulling her phone from a designer purse. Speaking in that hushed but excited tone influencers use when rehearsing a narrative. Yes, it happened so fast. I heard her faintly call into the phone as the yacht pulled away. She was confused. Must have slipped. Tragic. Truly. And then there was only darkness and salt. I want you to understand something. By the time a woman like me reaches her 50s, she knows the difference between clumsiness and betrayal. She knows when she's been plotted against. My late husband and I built a tech empire out of nothing, fought for every contract, every dollar, every ounce of respect. And when he passed, all of it, all $3 billion worth, was placed in my name, with our son Logan set to inherit only when I was gone. I thought it was security. What I didn't realize was that to him, and to the woman who now called me mom only in public, it was motive. But here is where the story bends. where it refuses to end the way they scripted it. Because while Sloane was spinning her influencer sob story into her phone, while Logan rehearsed his role as the grieving son, while the yacht carried them back to shore to prepare the papers that would erase me, fate or maybe justice placed a different ship in my path. Through blurred eyes and freezing limbs, I saw the shadow of a shrimp boat cutting across the horizon. Its deck lights flickered like salvation. With the last strength in me, I kicked free of my shoes and waved an arm. The vessel turned. A voice, gravelly and worn from years on the sea, shouted. "Hold on, Ma'am Rough Hands pulled me aboard." A blanket that smelled of salt and diesel was wrapped around me. A thermos of black coffee was pressed into my trembling palms. And a man with a face carved by decades of tides asked the question that burned through my bones. What in God's name happened to you? I could have told him everything right there, that my own blood had left me to die for money. That betrayal runs colder than the Atlantic itself. But I only said, between chattering teeth, family vacation. Because even then, half drowned and shivering, I understood survival wasn't enough. I couldn't simply expose them. I had to make them confess to themselves, to me, to the world. I had to let them believe they'd won, let them celebrate, let them start dividing my fortune. Only then would my revenge taste as sweet as the iced tea served at every Sunday potluck I'd ever hosted. So yes, I was pushed. Yes, I was supposed to vanish. Yes. My son and his wife returned home hours later, rehearsed in their grief, ready to call lawyers and bankers. But what they found instead was me, seated comfortably in my armchair, a lamp glowing by my side, and 2 envelopes waiting like judgment itself. One labeled mercy, the other labeled justice. And before they could even catch their breath, I smiled and said, "Which will you choose?" Before I go back in time, tell me, do you think my son is guilty or innocent? Type yes or no in the comments, I'll read it all. But before I tell you what was inside those envelopes, before I reveal how I survived long enough to turn the tide, we need to rewind. We need to go back to where the rot began, to the signs I ignored, the whispers I dismissed, the moments that, in hindsight, told me betrayal was already in motion. Because you don't just end up pushed off a yacht out of nowhere. No. The storm was building long before the first wave swallowed me. If you've ever lived in Charleston, you'll understand reputation is a kind of currency here. Your last name, the church pew you sit in, the charities you support, all of it adds up to the story people tell about you. For 30 years, my story was simple. Naomi Ellison, wife of Jared Ellison, the brilliant tech founder and co-architect of a company that became one of the South's great success tales. We built it together. Jared was the visionary. I was the operator. When he wanted to dream, I asked the hard questions. When he wanted to leap, I built the bridge. By the time the millennium rolled around, Ellison Tech was on the lips of bankers from Atlanta to New York. But 3 years ago, cancer stole him from me. And in the quiet that followed, I learned a cruel truth. Building an empire with the love of your life is one thing. Protecting it without him is another battle altogether. When Jared passed, the lawyers wrapped our fortune, about $3 billion, in a dynasty trust. They told me, "Naomi, you're secure now. Nothing can touch you. When you're gone, Logan will inherit." That's the beauty of a trust. Secure. That word echoed in my mind like a hymn. I wanted to believe it. But in hindsight, I see how naive I was. A trust is only as strong as the people surrounding it. And people change when money blurs their morals. Logan, my son, is 32, charming, photogenic, always the center of attention at cocktail hours. Charleston ladies call him the golden boy. But golden boys can tarnish. He liked the spotlight of being the heir. But responsibility, that was another matter. He jumped from job to job, project to project, chasing titles, but never substance. 3 years ago, he married Sloane. She was a different breed altogether. Glossy hair, curated feeds, an Instagram following that adored her authentic lifestyle brand. She sold candles, affirmations, guided meditations, the kind of wellness that comes with a price tag. At first, I thought she was simply ambitious, maybe insecure. Southern families, after all, have a long tradition of folding eccentric daughters-in-law into the fabric of Sunday dinners. But Sloane didn't just join our family. She rebranded it. She filmed reels in my kitchen. She posted photos wearing my jewelry. She spoke on her podcast about Ellison family values without ever acknowledging where those values came from. It wasn't partnership. It was appropriation. Still, I told myself she was young. Maybe she just needed time. Meanwhile, Charleston society looked at me and saw the steady widow. I still hosted luncheons for the ladies' circle, still volunteered at the AME church, still supported the arts. To the outside world, my life looked polished and complete. But inside my own home, the ground was beginning to tremble. Last spring, after knee replacement surgery, I was more vulnerable than I'd ever been. Recovery was slow and humbling. Logan and Sloane swooped in, eager to help. They insisted on organizing my medications, handling bills, even streamlining the family trust documents. I wanted to see their concern as love. I told myself suspicion was cynicism. I even gave Sloane the sapphire necklace Jared once bought me in Paris, hoping to make her feel like she belonged. But in hindsight, that's when the noose began to tighten. Then, one Tuesday morning in July, Logan called. His voice was warm, almost nostalgic. "Mom," he said, "we want to toast you to your recovery. Just the three of us. Like family should be." Those words pierced me. For months, I'd longed to hear him sound like my boy again. I told myself this was it, the turning point, the chance to mend what grief and distance had broken. So I accepted. I chose my navy silk dress, the one Jared always said made my eyes look like midnight. I called a cab to the Marina Independence mattered to me, even if my knee still ached. The yacht gleamed under the afternoon sun, 42 feet of polished fiberglass and chrome. Sloane posed on deck, her phone tilted for the perfect shot. Logan hugged me with a stiffness that felt rehearsed. "Isn't she gorgeous?" he asked, sweeping his arm toward the vessel. "Caribbean next month." I smiled, but unease pricked at me. Just a year earlier, I had given them $3 million for Logan's so-called consulting firm. Was this boat where it had gone? Still, I boarded, because mothers forgive. Mothers hope. The first hour was pleasant enough. Sloane poured mimosas, her laughter ringing across the deck. She spoke about remodeling their home, the very Ellison house I had signed over after Jared's passing, telling myself I no longer needed so much space. Logan asked about my therapy, about my recovery. And for a brief, fleeting moment, I believed we were finding our way back, but cracks showed quickly. Sloane angled her phone, capturing me in the background while pretending to film herself. Logan's questions shifted from my health to my estate. "Probate can get messy, Mom," he said casually, topping off my glass. "Better to simplify things now." I laughed, brushing it off, but unease curled in my stomach. I didn't know then that this celebration was just theater, that the champagne wasn't to my recovery, but to my departure. I didn't yet see the storm forming on the horizon. And yet, the first undeniable sign appeared not long after. Strange how something so small can alter everything. It came as the faintest whiff on Logan's blazer, a perfume I'd never owned, never worn, and one that had no business being on my son's clothes at all. What? Perfume? That was the first real crack in the picture-perfect veneer. It wasn't mine too sharp, too modern, the kind you'd find in a high-end department store in New York. Not in the cedar-scented aisles of the Charleston boutiques I preferred. I leaned closer to Logan's blazer as he poured champagne, and there it was again, unmistakable. A woman's fragrance, lingering where it had no business being. I didn't say anything that night on the yacht. What mother accuses her son of betrayal based on a whiff of perfume? Still, my mind kept circling it, like gulls chasing a fishing boat. Back home, the signs multiplied. First, it was paperwork. I'd always been meticulous. Jared used to call me the hawk. Every bill, every receipt, every legal document had a place. But after my surgery, I let Logan and Sloan handle some of the details. When I finally sat at my desk again, I noticed things were missing. Bank statements, insurance letters. Even the most recent correspondence from the family trust. "Oh, I just filed those for you," Sloan chirped when I asked. "You don't need to worry about all that. Filed where not in my cabinets, not in the locked safe Jared and I had used for decades." Then came the calls. My financial advisor, a man who had checked in faithfully for years, suddenly stopped returning my messages. His assistant would answer with polite apologies. "He's tied up this week, Mrs. Ellison, but he'll get back to you soon." Weeks stretched on. When I mentioned it at Sunday supper, Logan waved it off. "Mom, you're old-fashioned. Everyone handles things digitally now. Advisors don't need to call every time you sneeze." Sloan laughed like it was a private joke. Even the house felt different. I had signed it over to them after Jared's passing, telling myself I didn't need so much space alone. They kept it as family headquarters, but walking through it one afternoon, I felt like a guest. Furniture had been rearranged. My photos were pushed aside for glossy portraits of Logan and Sloan in coordinated outfits. In the study, where Jared once worked late into the night, I found Sloan's ring light set up, her laptop balanced on top of his leather-bound ledgers. "Content is currency, Naomi," she said when I raised an eyebrow. "Don't worry, I'll make sure the Ellison legacy trends." She said it with a wink, but I couldn't shake the chill it left behind. The worst, though, were the conversations they thought I couldn't hear. One evening, while staying at the guest room in their house, I overheard voices drifting from the kitchen. Logan's tone was sharp, frustrated. "She's dragging her feet," he hissed. "She'll come around," Sloan replied smoothly. "She's vulnerable. Just keep nudging. We need everything signed before fall." Everything signed. I pressed a hand to my chest, my heart pounding. Signed what I hadn't agreed to anything new. I hadn't authorized changes. I lay awake that night staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it whirl and click. For the first time, I let myself consider the unthinkable. My son, my only child, might be planning something against me. But suspicion without proof is just paranoia. I needed evidence. The first came unexpectedly. One morning, I found a slip of paper wedged under a stack of magazines in the sunroom. It was a receipt from a law firm in Savannah, not Charleston. My name was on it, but the signature at the bottom wasn't mine. When I confronted Logan, he brushed it off. "Oh, that's just a draft, Mom. Sloan and I were helping get your estate simplified. Less red tape when, eventually." His voice trailed off, but the implication was clear. I tried to tell myself it was clumsy love, that they were overstepping because they cared. But the perfume, the missing papers, the late-night whispers, it was too much to ignore. The breaking point came at a dinner party. Sloan had invited friends over young professionals, all influencers and entrepreneurs. I sat at the long oak table Jared and I once used for holiday meals, watching as she paraded our home like a stage set. Halfway through the evening, one guest raised a toast. To the Ellisons, the future of Charleston society. Sloan lifted her glass, glowing under the candlelight. and to building a new chapter, bigger, brighter, with everything aligned for the next generation. Everyone clapped. Logan smiled, but I caught the flicker in Sloane's eyes, the gleam of someone celebrating a victory already won. I left the table early, retreating upstairs. And there, on Logan's desk, I found the real confirmation, a folder carelessly left open, inside copies of legal documents with my name typed neatly, and signatures that looked like mine but weren't. I remember gripping the desk edge, trying to steady myself. The betrayal wasn't just possible. It was already in motion. Still, I told no one. Not yet. In Charleston, you don't scream scandal without being sure. Gossip is a wildfire. Once it starts, you can't control it. I needed more. So I began paying attention, not as a mother, but as the hawk Jared once knew me to be. I noted the late-night drives Logan took, the private calls Sloane answered in the pantry. I kept mental records of every missing piece of mail, every unexplained draft document. And slowly, the picture began to form ugly, undeniable. The perfume was no accident. The missing papers were no oversight. The whispers weren't harmless. Something deliberate was happening. Something orchestrated. And Naomi Ellison, was no longer just a mother recovering from surgery. I was a mark. But what I didn't yet know, the detail that would make everything collapse into clarity, was that the betrayal went even deeper than forged signatures or stolen trust funds. It was hiding in plain sight, buried inside the very story they were telling about me. And the first glimpse of that truth came not from a lawyer, not from a banker, but from a photograph. A single photograph that turned suspicion into certainty. The photograph arrived on a Thursday afternoon, tucked inside a glossy envelope addressed in a hand I didn't recognize. No return address, no note. Just my name, written with a fountain pen that pressed hard enough to leave indents. Inside was a single print. At first, I thought it was just another one of Sloane's endless influencer snapshots, her smile wide, hair cascading in effortless waves, glass of rosé in hand. But then my eyes shifted to the background. There I was. Or rather, a version of me. Sitting at Logan's birthday party the previous year, caught mid-blink, my hand clutching a drink, my expression unfocused. Out of context, it looked like confusion. Out of context, it looked like dementia. Someone had taken that moment, frozen it, and now it was circulating. How it landed in my mailbox, I couldn't say. But I knew one thing. It wasn't an accident. That night, I confronted Logan. Why would anyone send me this, I asked, holding up the photograph. He glanced at it and shrugged. Mom, you do look, I don't know, distracted. People notice things. Distracted. My voice rose. I wasn't distracted. I was surprised. You told me we were having a quiet family dinner, and I walked into a room of 30 strangers yelling, "Happy birthday." That's not confusion, Logan. That's shock. He sighed, rubbing his temples as though I were the one exhausting him. Look, people are going to draw their own conclusions. Maybe it's time you stopped worrying about appearances. Appearances. In Charleston, that's all anyone ever worries about. I couldn't sleep that night. I paced my condo, the city lights blinking beyond the harbor. At 2 a.m, I poured myself a glass of sweet tea, sat at my desk, and began to dig. I searched my own name, articles, mentions, social media tags, and there it was, dozens of subtle references, whispers in digital corners. Poor Naomi. She's not the same since Jared passed. Did you hear she's been forgetting things? So sad and watching decline in real time. Where had these rumors started? The answer came in the form of a podcast episode uploaded just weeks earlier. The voice was unmistakable. Sloan. The title, Caring for Aging Parents. When Memory Fades. I clicked play, my hands trembling. My husband and I, Sloan's silky voice purred, have been navigating the challenges of supporting a loved one who's losing her clarity. It's heartbreaking, but important to be proactive with legal and financial matters. You never want to wait until it's too late. She never said my name. She didn't need to. Everyone in Charleston knew who her loved one was. The photograph, the gossip, the podcast. It all lined up into something sinister. They were building a case, a narrative. I wasn't a strong widow safeguarding a legacy. I was a confused, declining liability. And if people believed that story, then the forged signatures I'd glimpsed would seem perfectly reasonable. Who wouldn't sign over power of attorney for convenience? Who wouldn't want their capable son and polished daughter-in-law handling things? I needed proof. Not just instincts, not just late-night suspicions, real, tangible evidence. So I went back to the study in the house I had signed over the one that no longer felt like mine. I waited until Logan and Sloan left for dinner one Friday night. My old keys still worked. Inside, the house smelled different, no longer the warm mix of cedar polish and lemon cleaner I favored, but sterile, sharp, like hotel rooms trying too hard. I crept to the study. Papers were scattered across the desk. I pulled out my phone and began to snap photos. One document in particular made my knees weaken a timeline titled The Naomi Project. Each entry was precise. Dates, events, explanations. April medication mix-up. ER visit document as confusion. June surprise party capture photo of disorientation. July recovery slower than expected note as cognitive decline. They weren't observing me. They were staging me. But the real dagger came at the bottom of the page, Phase 3 transition assets. Finalize guardianship petition. Guardianship. The legal process used when someone is declared incompetent. They weren't just plotting to take my money. They were planning to erase me. I staggered back, clutching the desk. For a moment, I considered calling the police right then. But what would I say that my own son was plotting against me? That my daughter-in-law was weaponizing Instagram without evidence in hand? It would sound like the ramblings of exactly what they claimed. I was becoming paranoid, declining. So I photographed everything. Every page, every forged signature, every staged incident. My phone's storage filled with digital proof of betrayal. As I slipped out the back door, headlights flashed across the driveway. Logan's car. Panic surged through me. I darted into the garden, crouching behind the very rose bushes Jared and I had planted 20 years earlier. Their voices floated through the night. "Do you think the Peterson woman believed it?" Sloan asked, her tone casual. She was crying too hard to think. Logan replied, "Besides, what can she investigate? Mom fell off a boat. Tragic accidents happen all the time." The yacht, my stomach turned. They weren't just planning. They were already rehearsing the cover story. I fled into the night, heart pounding, phone heavy in my hand with images that could ruin them. For the first time, suspicion had hardened into certainty. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't paranoid. My son and his wife were orchestrating my erasure. But what I didn't yet understand was how far the web stretched. Because betrayal that sophisticated rarely works in isolation. And the first thread of that larger conspiracy appeared the very next day, woven not into a document, but into the cry of an infant. The cry came sharp through the humid Charleston night, thin and unmistakable. I froze on the sidewalk outside the Ellison house, clutching my phone with its gallery of damning photos. The neighborhood was quiet, live oaks heavy with moss, porch lights glowing in the summer dusk. But from inside the home I had given to my son, there was no mistaking it. A baby. My first instinct was disbelief. Logan and Sloan had never wanted children, at least. That's what they'd always claimed. We're too focused on our careers right now. Sloan would laugh at cocktail parties. Maybe in 10 years. Logan echoed her every time. So why did I hear a child crying in their home now? When neither had shown the slightest hint of pregnancy, I pressed myself against the rose bushes, heart racing, listening as the crying softened. I caught the muffled rhythm of a woman's voice, not Sloane's polished tones, but someone else, a caretaker. Questions swirled, dizzying. Whose baby was this? Why was it in my former home? And what on earth did it have to do with Phase 3 of their so-called Naomi project? I didn't sleep that night. Back in my condo, I sat at the kitchen table with a pot of coffee, laying out the puzzle pieces like evidence on a detective's board. Forged signatures. A timeline documenting my decline. Gossip seeded through social media. And now, a baby hidden in their home. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theater. Logan and Sloan were building a narrative in layers: the confused widow, the dutiful son, the perfect young family stepping up for the sake of the legacy. And if the world bought that story, I would vanish not just from the yacht, but from memory. I needed an ally. Someone outside the family. Someone I could trust. So the next morning, I drove to Mount Pleasant and knocked on the weather-beaten door of Jake Morrison, an old friend of Jared's. Jake was a retired shrimp boat captain, the kind of man who could smell a storm before the weather report did. When he opened the door, his eyes widened. "Naomi Lord, you look like you haven't slept in a week." "I haven't," I admitted. Over coffee that smelled of salt and diesel, I laid everything out: the forged documents, the staged photographs, the whispered conversations, even the sound of the infant. Jake listened without interrupting, his brow furrowed deeper with every word. Finally, he leaned back. "Sounds like they're painting you into a corner. If they get you declared incompetent, they'll control it all. Money, property, even your story." I nodded. "And I can't just accuse them?" "Not yet. I need proof strong enough to stand up in court, in the press, in Charleston society. Otherwise, I look exactly like what they're claiming. I am confused." Jake tapped his mug. "Then you need eyes inside that house. Someone who knows what's happening day to day." That's when I thought of the woman's voice I'd heard soothing the baby. A caretaker. A nanny. If I could reach her, she might tell me the truth. The opportunity came sooner than expected. 2 days later, I returned to the street, this time in broad daylight. From my car parked under a live oak, I watched the front door of the Ellison house. At 11 sharp, a young woman stepped out, locking the door behind her. She wore scrubs printed with cartoon animals and carried a diaper bag slung over one shoulder. I followed at a distance as she walked down the block and climbed into a modest sedan. The license plate told me she was local. I trailed her to a small grocery store, heart pounding. I waited until she was in the baby aisle before approaching. "Excuse me," I said softly. "You're caring for a child at the Ellison residence, aren't you?" Her eyes widened. "Who's asking?" "My name is Naomi Ellison," I said, voice low but firm. "That house used to be mine." Shock rippled across her face. "But you're—" She stopped herself. "Supposed to be losing my memory I finished for her?" "Yes, that's the story they're telling." The young woman shifted uncomfortably. "I don't want trouble. I was hired through an agency. The baby's healthy, and I'm just there to do my job." "What's his name?" I pressed gently. She hesitated, then whispered, "Robert. They call him Robert Jr." My breath caught. Robert Jared's middle name, a name steeped in Ellison history. They were weaving the child directly into the family narrative. But he isn't theirs. Is he? I asked. She looked away, lips pressed tight. I don't know. I wasn't told much. Just be careful. Mrs. Ellison. I left the store shaken. A baby named Robert, living in my former house, cared for by a stranger, hidden from society. The pieces aligned with a cold, terrible logic. If Logan and Sloane presented themselves as parents responsible, youthful, unstable, then the story of me as a declining widow only grew stronger. Who would question transferring assets when the next generation was already secure? It was genius, in a twisted way, and deadly. That night, I met Jake again. They've got a child. I told him. They're passing him off as their own. His name is Robert Jr. Jake whistled low. That's no accident. They're building an heir, a prop in their play. I nodded grimly. And if they succeed, everything Jared and I built won't just be stolen, it'll be rewritten. I'll be painted out of the story, replaced by Sloane's fantasy of the perfect family. Jake leaned forward. Then we don't just need to catch them lying. We need to catch them using that baby in the scheme. Get the nanny talking. Get proof. I exhaled, steadying myself. Then, that's what I'll do. But deep down, I knew the stakes had shifted. This wasn't only about my fortune anymore. It was about a child, an innocent life being used as a pawn in a game of greed. And I swore, as God was my witness, that I would not let them destroy me or shape him into their fiction. Because I was no longer just fighting for my legacy. I was fighting for the truth. The breakthrough came on a sweltering Monday afternoon. Charleston heat clung to my skin like a damp sheet as I waited in my car outside the Ellison house, eyes fixed on the young nanny's sedan parked in the driveway. I had rehearsed my words a dozen times. She was my only way in. When she finally emerged, diaper bag slung over her shoulder, sunglasses slipping down her nose, I stepped from my car. Please, I called softly, just hear me out. She froze, scanning me with wide eyes. Mrs. Ellison, you shouldn't be here. If they see us, they won't, I said quickly. Just 5 minutes. That's all I ask. Her jaw tightened. She glanced at the house, then at me. Something in my voice must have pierced her caution, because after a long pause, she nodded. 5 minutes. We drove to a small cafe tucked behind a gas station on Savannah Highway. Far from the polished places Sloane frequented, the nanny ordered an iced tea, hands trembling around the cup. My name's Caroline, she said quietly. Caroline Peterson. And I know more than I should already. Then please, I urged, tell me. Caroline's eyes softened. The baby Robert. As they call him, he isn't theirs. Not by birth. My chest constricted. Then whose is he? Caroline hesitated, lowering her voice. I don't know the whole story. All I know is 3 weeks ago, I got a call from the agency. Said a private family needed discreet care for a newborn. No hospital records provided, just a forged birth certificate. I've worked with kids my whole career. I can spot paperwork that doesn't add up. But the money was substantial. Too much to ask questions. She fished in her purse and pulled out a folded copy. My fingers shook as I unfolded it. Birth certificate child Robert Ellison, Jr. Mother Sloane Ellison. Father Logan Ellison. I stared at it, bile rising. This is a lie. I saw Sloane 4 days before that date. She wasn't recovering from childbirth. She was parading in sundresses. Caroline nodded. Exactly. She never carried this baby. I don't know where he came from, but, her voice faltered, sometimes at night, when he cries. I wonder if he's even safe with them. They treat him like a prop. Photo shoots, rehearsed cooing when guests visit, but when the cameras go off, she stopped, eyes glistening. When the cameras go off what I pressed, they ignore him, she whispered, like he's an accessory, not a child. I left the cafe trembling with fury. Sloane hadn't just stolen my name, my home, my reputation she had staged in air. She was rewriting the Ellison legacy with a child she could pass off as her own. The implications were staggering. If the courts believed that forged birth certificate, then any inheritance, any trust, any future claim could be funneled straight through him. And me, I would be a footnote. The confused grandmother who faded out while the shining young couple raised their perfect baby. It was brilliant, diabolical. And now I had my first piece of undeniable proof. That evening, I drove to Jake's. He was sanding down the deck of his old shrimp boat when I arrived. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Worse," I replied, handing him the folded paper. He read silently, his expression hardening, forged, plain as day. They're not just scheming anymore. Naomi. They're manufacturing a whole new family tree. I sank onto a crate, my hands covering my face. They've turned my life into a stage play. Jake. Every line rehearsed, every prop in place. And now, this baby, this innocent child, he's part of their act. Jake sat beside me. Then we turned the play against them. Props cut both ways. If they want to build a fake story, we build a true one, stronger. But first, we need more than one forged paper. We need context. Where did this child really come from? His words lit a fire in me. For days, I followed the threads. Caroline helped when she could quietly, carefully, slipping me notes about the baby's routines, about the strange visitors who came and went from the house. One evening, she mentioned a woman who had visited twice a lawyer with auburn hair, carrying a leather briefcase. The nanny overheard Sloane call her Miranda. The name chilled me. Miranda Torres. I had met her once at a charity gala. A state lawyer. Smooth, persuasive. The kind of woman who specialized in family transitions. She had cornered me that night, asking pointed questions about my trust, about whether I had supportive heirs. I hadn't realized then how loaded her questions were. Now the picture sharpened. Logan and Sloane, rehearsing grief. A forged birth certificate. A lawyer with a reputation for manipulating inheritances. A baby at the center, used as a living pawn. The first revelation hit me harder than the Atlantic ever had. This wasn't just about greed. It was organized, calculated, professional. And I, the supposed matriarch, wasn't their only victim. That night, I sat in my condo staring at Jared's portrait above the mantel. His eyes, kind even in paint, seemed to urge me on. "They think they've written me out," I whispered. "But they've forgotten who taught Logan how to play chess. They've forgotten I've fought every battle beside you. And they've forgotten that the hawk doesn't just watch, she strikes." But before I could plan my counterattack, I needed the second revelation, the one buried even deeper. Because the baby wasn't just proof of fraud. He was proof of something darker, something that linked Sloane, Logan, and Miranda into a web of betrayal spanning far beyond me. And the first thread of that truth would come not from papers, not from whispers, but from a name scribbled at the bottom of a letter. A name that made my blood run cold. The letter sat on my kitchen table, the edges curling in the humid Charleston air, as if even the paper itself carried the weight of corruption. Caroline had slipped it into my hands only hours earlier. It was lying out in the study. She whispered nervously, "I shouldn't have taken it, but something told me you needed to see it." I hadn't known what to expect. A bill, a lawyer's memo, another forged document. But when I opened the envelope, The words inside stole the breath from my lungs. Phase 3 must be accelerated. Naomi has begun asking too many questions. If she seeks independent counsel, the guardianship petition collapses. We cannot risk delay. The accident must occur within 2 weeks. At the bottom, in precise, curling ink, were the initials M.T. Miranda Torres. For a long time, I couldn't move. My eyes darted across the page, reading and rereading the cold instructions. 2 weeks. They had given me an expiration date. I pressed the paper flat against the table, my hands trembling. It wasn't only betrayal, it was bureaucracy of betrayal. My own erasure reduced to phases, deadlines, execution orders, as neat and casual as planning a charity luncheon. And Logan's name was scrawled in the header. The letter was addressed directly to my son. That broke me in ways the shove from the yacht never could. I thought of Logan as a boy, the way he used to crawl into my lap with sand still stuck between his toes after a day at Sullivan's Island. I thought of the first time he told me he loved Sloane, nervous but glowing, like a man who had found his future. Had he always been capable of this, or had something in him withered slowly, so slowly that I, blinded by hope, had failed to see the rot I carried the letter to Jake the next morning? He was repairing a net on his old shrimp boat, the smell of brine heavy in the air. When he read it, his jaw clenched. Damn. This isn't just a greedy daughter-in-law whispering in his ear. Your boy's in it. Naomi? Up to his neck. I nodded numbly. Miranda isn't just advising. She's orchestrating. And Logan, he's following orders. Jake set the paper down carefully, like it might burn through the wood. Then you've got more than a family squabble. You've got organized crime in pearls and pinstripes. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the hope that Logan was manipulated, pushed, coerced. But denial couldn't survive what happened next, because Caroline, brave girl that she was, planted her phone in the nursery the following afternoon, hidden under the crib mattress. She told me later her hands shook the whole time. That night, she sent me the recording. Just a text with a single file and 3 words, "You need this." I pressed play. Sloane's voice first, sharp beneath her sweetness. Once the guardianship is finalized, Naomi's word won't count for anything. We'll have full control of the estate. And with Robert Jr. in the picture, no judge will second guess us. It's foolproof. Then Logan's voice, my son, calm, icy, strategic. We just need to get her back on the yacht. No drama this time, just a slip, a wave, an accident. Nobody questions it twice. The sooner it's done, the easier everything falls into place. I dropped the phone as if it had burned me. The recording kept playing, muffled against the carpet. Their voices plotting the neat disposal of my life. I picked it up again, forcing myself to listen. Sloane laughed lightly. We'll toast, we'll smile. And this time, she won't be coming back. By Monday, Miranda will have the petition filed. By Christmas, the fortune's legally ours. Logan chuckled and said, "She always loved the water." I guess it's fitting. I ended the recording there, unable to hear another word. My legs gave out. I slid to the floor, back against the sofa. The phone clutched to my chest. Tears blurred my vision. Logan. My boy. This wasn't hesitation. This wasn't a man trapped by his wife's schemes. This was collaboration, deliberation, enthusiasm. And in that moment, I felt something inside me shift. The grief of a mother turned into the steel of a survivor. I sat there until the tears dried on my cheeks. Then I pulled myself up, walked to Jared's portrait above the mantel, and stared into his painted eyes. They think they're clever. I whispered. They think they're playing chess. But they've forgotten who taught Logan the game. My reflection in the glass looked older, harder, but unbroken. They've chosen their roles, I said softly. Then I'll play mine. And I won't just survive their story. I'll rewrite it. That night, I began drafting my counterattack. Every scrap of evidence, Miranda's letter, the forged birth certificate, the staged photographs, the recording of Logan's voice plotting my accident went into a neat folder. I wrote notes in red ink, connecting names, timelines, motives. Arrows pointed from Logan to Sloan, from Sloan to Miranda, from Miranda to initials and contacts still in shadow. A web stretched across the page, and at its center sat one truth. They had underestimated me. They thought I was alone. They thought I was fading. But a woman who has nothing left to lose is the most dangerous opponent of all. The letter from Miranda had given me a deadline. 2 weeks. But I would not wait to be erased. By the time the tide turned, it would not be me disappearing into the Atlantic. It would be them drowned by the weight of their own lies. The morning after the recording shattered the last of my illusions, I woke with a clarity sharper than any knife. For the first time since Jared's funeral, I wasn't waking up as a grieving widow or a confused target. I was waking up as a strategist. My son wanted me erased. Sloan wanted to wear my crown. Miranda wanted to cash her percentage. But none of them had counted on me having allies. I drove to Jake's, the folder of evidence resting on the passenger seat like sacred scripture. He was on the dock, coiling ropes. Looks like you haven't slept, he said, narrowing his eyes. I haven't, I admitted. But I've been planning. He straightened. Tell me. I laid out the pieces, the forged birth certificate, the timeline of my decline, Miranda's damning letter, and the recording of Logan casually plotting my second death. Jake whistled low. That's a noose with their names on it. Not yet, I said firmly. If I go to the police now, Sloan spins the dementia story. Miranda buries me in motions and sealed files. Charleston society clucks about poor Naomi, losing her grip. So what's the play, Jake asked. We let them walk into their own trap, I replied. Phase 1 of my plan was surveillance. Caroline agreed to keep feeding me details who came to the house, what was said, where documents were stored. Her phone became my secret window into the life Sloan thought she had perfected. Phase 2 was amplification. I began dropping subtle whispers in Charleston circles, the right bridge club, the right charity luncheon. Nothing direct. Just little seeds. Isn't it odd how quickly Logan and Sloan adjusted after Jared's passing? Or did you know they've already updated family portraits with the baby? Charleston runs on whispers. Within days, people began asking quiet questions. Phase 3 was legal groundwork. I visited an old friend, Patricia Walsh, a retired probate judge with a sharp mind and no patience for pretense. Over sweet tea on her porch, I showed her the documents. Patricia's eyes darkened. This Torres woman isn't new. I've heard rumors families pushed into guardianship too fast, wills contested with suspicious signatures. But no one's ever had proof like this. Would you testify, I asked? She nodded, gladly. But Naomi, you need to be careful. If they realize you're ahead of them, they'll accelerate. I smiled grimly. That's exactly what I'm counting on. The hardest part was pretending. I let Logan and Sloan think they were winning. When Logan called with his performative concern, Mom, are you remembering to take your pills? I forced my voice to wobble. Let a pause hang too long. When Sloan visited with a casserole, I fumbled the oven mitts deliberately, as if my hands were clumsy. They left reassured, exactly as I intended. Meanwhile, Jake became my shadow. He started docking his boat near the Ellison Marina, listening, watching. It was he who caught sight of Miranda meeting them at a private club downtown, briefcase in hand. "She's running point," Jake reported. "Every move they make, she's scripting it." Good. The more she orchestrated, the bigger the web she wove around herself. My plan hinged on one event, the guardianship hearing Miranda had scheduled for 3 weeks out. I would let them walk into that courtroom brimming with confidence, documents in hand, lies rehearsed, and then I would burn their script to ash. To prepare, I needed a stage. That stage would be public opinion. Caroline helped me record a video, simple, unpolished, just me in my condo, speaking directly to the camera. I didn't release it. Not yet. But it was cued, time-stamped, ready to flood social media and local news the moment the hearing began. In it, I laid out my story calmly, the forged documents, the false narrative of dementia, the mysterious appearance of a child passed off as Sloane's, and the letter from Miranda plotting my accident. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse hysterically. I spoke like the woman I was, a mother betrayed, a widow targeted, a matriarch refusing to be erased. Jake watched the draft with tears in his eyes. "Naomi, when that goes live, they won't have a prayer. That's the idea," I said. But I wanted more than survival. I wanted exposure. I wanted Charleston's elite, the very people Sloane sought to impress, to witness her downfall firsthand. So I arranged for the guardianship hearing to be accidentally leaked to a few society reporters. Nothing dramatic, just a tip that something significant involving the Ellisons was happening at probate court. Reporters love a scandal, especially one wrapped in pearls and yacht clubs. The last piece was psychological. I wanted Logan and Sloane nervous, second-guessing. So I sent them a note, hand-delivered by courier, elegant stationery with my initials embossed. It read, "Some stories don't end the way you plan. See you in court." N. Jake thought it was reckless. "You're poking the bear. That's the point." I told him. A rattled liar makes mistakes. And they did. Within 48 hours, Sloane's podcast posted a new episode titled, "When Families Must Step In." Her voice shook slightly as she painted a picture of me as helpless, declining, fragile. But in her rush, she slipped a reference to documents already signed that no one outside the scheme should have known about. Jake grinned when he heard it. That's a rope she just wrapped around her own neck. With every move, the noose tightened. I had the evidence. I had allies. I had the narrative. Now, all that remained was the performance. And if Logan and Sloane thought they were about to watch me vanish quietly into guardianship, they were in for the shock of their lives, because I wasn't walking into that courtroom as their victim. I was walking in as their reckoning. The morning of the hearing dawned humid and gray. Charleston's skyline veiled in mist. I dressed deliberately, not in somber widow's black or the pale neutrals of decline, but in a deep sapphire suit Jared had once loved, strong, unapologetic. As I buttoned the jacket, I whispered to my reflection, "Today, you stop being prey." At probate court, Sloane and Logan arrived first. She wore her signature white sheath dress, pearls gleaming, a picture of the grieving but dutiful daughter-in-law. Logan hovered at her side, shoulders squared, his expression carefully composed. Behind them, Miranda Torres strode in, briefcase in hand, radiating confidence. They looked like royalty entering a coronation. They had no idea the crown they sought was already crumbling. Inside the courtroom, a small crowd had gathered, reporters, society watchers, a few curious onlookers. My leak had worked. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but Charleston's rumor mill would carry every detail out into the world. Judge Harmon, a stern woman in her 60s, presided. "We are here to hear the petition for guardianship of Naomi Ellison," she began. Sloane's eyes flicked toward me then, just for a second, expecting to see a frail, confused woman. Instead, I met her gaze head on, and I smiled, Her lips tightened. Miranda rose first, her voice smooth as butter. Your Honor, this case is about compassion. My clients, Logan and Sloan Ellison, have acted only out of love and duty as Mrs. Ellison has demonstrated signs of significant cognitive decline. She placed a folder of documents on the table with theatrical precision. We have evidence of confusion, forgetfulness, disorientation, for her safety, and to protect the substantial estate left vulnerable by her late husband. Guardianship is not only appropriate, it is necessary. The performance was flawless. Anyone unfamiliar with the truth might have believed her, but the truth was about to speak for itself. When it was my turn, I rose slowly, letting the room quiet. Your Honor, I began, my voice steady. For months, my son and his wife have been weaving a story designed to erase me. Today, I will not only tell you that story, I will show you the proof. I nodded toward Jake, who carried my neatly organized folder. Patricia Walsh, the retired judge, sat ready in the gallery, her presence alone lending weight. I opened with the forged birth certificate. This document claims Sloan Ellison gave birth to a child named Robert Jr., but Sloan was never pregnant. The certificate is fabricated. The baby in their home is not hers by blood. He is being used as a pawn to rewrite the Ellison legacy. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Reporters scribbled furiously. Sloan's smile faltered for the first time. Next, I produced Miranda's letter, careful to hold it high so the gallery could see. This is from Miranda Torres herself, instructing my son that the accident must occur within 2 weeks. Those words are not about compassion. They are about my death, planned and scheduled like a business meeting. Miranda's composure cracked. She leaned toward Logan, whispering urgently. Judge Harmon's eyes narrowed. Is this your handwriting? Minyao, Torres Miranda tried to speak, but I cut her off. And finally, I said, my voice rising, we have their own words. I pressed play on the recording Caroline had risked everything to capture. Logan's voice filled the courtroom, cold and deliberate. We just need to get her back on the yacht. No drama this time, just a slip. A wave, an accident. Nobody questions it twice. A hush fell so deep I could hear my own heartbeat. I turned to face my son. Logan, I said softly, I gave you life. I built the foundation you stand on. And this I held up the recorder is how you plan to repay me. His face drained of color. Sloan hissed. This is entrapment, but Judge Harmon's gavel cracked against the bench. Silence. This court will not tolerate theatrics. Patricia rose then, her voice carrying the authority of decades. Your Honor, as a former probate judge, I can attest these documents and recordings demonstrate a pattern of coercion and fraud designed to strip Mrs. Ellison of her rights and her estate. Guardianship is not warranted here. Criminal investigation is. The judge's gaze swept over Logan, Sloan, and Miranda like a blade. Mrs. Ellison, she said to me, you may sit. This court will recess briefly while I confer with law enforcement. When we returned, 2 plainclothes officers stood by the door. Judge Harmon's voice was calm but steely. This guardianship petition is denied. Furthermore, I am ordering immediate investigation into potential fraud, conspiracy, and attempted homicide. Officers, please detain Miss Torres and hold Mr. and Mrs. Ellison for questioning. The room erupted, reporters rushing out, whispers flying. Miranda stiffened as the officers took her by the arm. Logan sagged in his chair, the mask gone, leaving only shame. But Sloan. She turned to me, eyes blazing with fury, and spat. You'll regret this. I simply smiled. No, darling. You will. Outside the courthouse, the humid air felt like freedom. Reporters swarmed, questions flying. Mrs. Ellison. Did your son really plot your death? Is it true the baby isn't their child? What happens to the estate now? I lifted my chin. The camera's flashing. The truth has a way of surviving, no matter how many lies are told. My story is not one of weakness, it is one of justice, and justice has only just begun. Jake slipped his arm around my shoulders, guiding me toward the car. You did it, he murmured. No, I corrected. We did it. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't entirely over. Sloane's last words still echoed in my ears like a warning. You'll regret this. The court had stripped them of their victory, but desperation can make dangerous people even more reckless. And while I had won the day, I couldn't shake the sense that one final move remained on the board. The courthouse steps felt like another world, one where sunlight pierced the humid Charleston haze, and people looked at me not with pity, but with respect. For months, I had been cast as the frail widow, confused and declining. But now, with the truth spilling into headlines, I stood taller, steadier, as if Jared himself were lifting me up. Within days, the news spread like wildfire. Charleston heiress outsmarts family plot. Attorney Miranda Torres arrested in guardianship fraud scheme. Baby at center of scandal raises. Questions about surrogacy and inheritance. Friends I hadn't heard from in years called, their voices trembling with outrage and sympathy. Neighbors dropped off casseroles, not because they thought I was helpless, but because they wanted to stand beside me. And Society Charleston's sharpest judge turned its back on Logan and Sloane. The legal wheels moved swiftly. Miranda's firm disowned her, though whispers suggested she'd orchestrated similar family transitions across the South. Investigators dug into her records, uncovering a pattern of elderly clients who had mysteriously declined just before their fortunes changed hands. Logan and Sloane were charged with conspiracy and fraud. Their lawyers tried to paint them as misguided, manipulated by Miranda. But the recording of Logan plotting my accident shredded that defense to ribbons. As for the baby, Caroline testified about the forged documents and her own suspicions. A DNA test confirmed what we already knew. Robert Jr. was not biologically related to either Logan or Sloane. The truth was messier, more heartbreaking. He had been born to a teenage surrogate, one who had vanished from records soon after delivery. Her name, Sarah Collins, surfaced thanks to a nurse willing to speak. She had been promised a future. She never got one. The court placed the baby temporarily in protective care. But when the dust settled, I petitioned to adopt him myself, not as an heir, not as a pawn, but as a child who deserved love, truth, and family that wouldn't use him. The judge approved, with tears in her eyes, so I brought him home, to my home. Life after the storm wasn't simple. Charleston society loves a scandal, but it also loves to move on. Within months, new gossip replaced my story. Yet in the quiet of my evenings, I felt the echo of everything that had been lost and everything that had been saved. I grieved my son, because though Logan still breathed, the boy I raised was gone. I grieved Jared again, wishing he had been here to see me fight, but I also found healing in Robert's giggles, in Caroline's steady presence as his nanny, now more like family than hired help, in Jake's laughter on the dock, the way he always called me Hawk, now sharp-eyed, unbreakable. 5 years passed. I was 72 when Robert started school, a lively boy with serious brown eyes who loved to build castles out of blocks and tell stories about his Papa Jared as if he'd known him. I never hid the truth from him. He knows he was born of a brave young woman named Sarah, and that her choice, though stolen from her, gave him life. He knows that Logan and Sloane tried to use him for greed, but that he was saved by people who chose love over lies. He knows, because I've told him that family is not about blood or obligation. It is about showing up, about protecting each other, about truth. One evening, as Robert sat at the kitchen table drawing pictures, he asked, "Grandma, Why did they want to hurt you? I paused, gathering my words. Because sometimes, sweetheart, people let greed blind them. They forget love. They forget loyalty. And when that happens, they hurt the very people they should cherish. He frowned, small hands gripping his crayon. But we don't forget. I smiled. Noah, darling, we don't. The world sees me now not as a victim, but as proof. Proof that even when betrayal comes from within your own home, strength can rise from the ashes. I've spoken at senior centers, warning others about guardianship abuse. I've met families who saw their loved ones almost erased by schemes dressed in legal robes. And I've told them, you have more power than you think. Don't let anyone convince you your voice doesn't matter. Because if I had stayed silent, I wouldn't be here. And neither would Robert. Logan and Sloan remain in prison. Letters arrive, sometimes pleas, apologies, explanations. Logan writes about being manipulated, about how he was pressured into things he didn't mean. I read them. Then I tuck them away. Because forgiveness is not the same as forgetting. And some wounds must remain scars. Reminders of where I've been. Sometimes at night, I sit on the porch with Jake, the cicadas buzzing, Robert asleep inside. Jake teases me about fishing trips we'll never take, and I tease him about how many cups of sugar he puts in his tea. And in those quiet moments, I feel something I never thought I'd feel again after Jared's passing peace. Not perfect peace, but peace enough. Yet one detail still lingers, unresolved. When investigators dug through Miranda's files, they found dozens of letters, timelines, staged photographs, each one tied to a family like mine. But one file was missing. The file labeled Naomi Ellison, vanished. Who took it and why sometimes, when I lie awake in the dark, I wonder if there's still someone out there, someone who helped Miranda, someone who knows more than they've revealed. Was Miranda truly the mastermind, or was she a pawn in a larger game I may never know? But the thought lingers, like a shadow at the edge of the light. Still, I choose light. I choose to end my story not as a woman pushed off a yacht, but as a woman who climbed out of the water, stood tall, and built a new legacy not of money, but of love. Because the greatest revenge is not merely surviving, it's thriving. And every time Robert laughs, every time he calls me grandma, every time I remind another woman that her voice matters, I know I won. Your turn. If you were Naomi, would you forgive Logan or close that chapter forever? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your perspective might be the light another woman needs tonight. If this story moved you, hit like and send it to a friend who craves strength and justice. For more cinematic life dramas woven with secrets, betrayals, smart revenge, and healing, subscribe to Voice of Neva and ring the bell so you never miss a chapter. Thank you for watching, for feeling, and for thinking out loud. See you in the next story.
Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace, or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.